Trapped in the wreckage of his own life, billionaire Luke Royce thought he had it all, until a mysterious stranger risked everything to save him. But was this chance encounter just a twist of fate, or something more miraculous? Keep watching to find out how this story unfolds. Where are you tuning in from? Drop your location and let us know where you're watching from. Luke Royce was known far and wide for his wealth, charm, and sharp business sense. People saw him as one of the world's luckiest men, a billionaire with a thriving company, houses in the most beautiful places, and a life that seemed like a dream. Yet beyond all the glitz and glamour, Luke carried a sadness so deep that not even his wealth could hide it. Luke's mansion was stunning, a place most people would only see in movies. Marble floors, tall windows that stretched to the ceiling, sparkling chandeliers, and walls decorated with beautiful paintings from all over the world. Yet in the middle of all this luxury, Luke often felt something was missing. Even though he lived in such a huge house, it always felt empty. There was no laughter, no warmth, and no family to share it with. Luke, though strong and successful, carried a secret that weighed heavily on his heart. He could never be a father. Years ago, Luke had dreamed of having a family of his own. He imagined coming home after a long day of work to the joyful sounds of children running to greet him and the warmth of a loving family. But a visit to the doctor had crushed those dreams. He had learned that he could never have children of his own. It was a truth that hurt deeply, and even though he had everything he could want, the one thing he desired most was forever out of reach. Every time he saw families in parks, children laughing, or friends talking about their kids, he felt a pang in his heart. He'd smile politely, acting as though it didn't affect him. But inside, he ached for the family he would never have. To the world, Luke Royce was a man who had it all, but behind closed doors, he was simply a lonely man wishing for something money couldn't buy. One night, as Luke drove down a quiet, dark road, he found himself thinking about his life. The road was empty, with only a few flickering streetlights guiding his way. He thought about his mansion, his fancy cars, his business, and the endless dinners and events. Yet, none of it could fill the hole in his heart. He felt restless, as if he was searching for something he couldn't name. The silence of the road matched the silence he often felt inside. Suddenly, as he rounded a corner, his car slid on the wet road. It happened so fast that Luke barely had time to react. The car spun wildly, and before he knew it, he was crashing into a ditch beside the road. The sound of metal crunching was deafening, and everything went dark. When Luke opened his eyes, he felt pain coursing through his body. He tried to move, but his leg was trapped. He reached out to unbuckle his seatbelt, but even that small movement sent a sharp pain through his arm. His head felt heavy, and there was blood trickling down his forehead. Trapped inside the wreckage, Luke's heart sank. He was alone on this deserted road with no one to help him. The pain was making it hard to keep his eyes open, and he was starting to feel weaker with each passing moment. Thoughts raced through his mind, thoughts that terrified him. What if no one found him? What if he never made it out of this car? The idea of lying there, forgotten on the side of the road, made him feel a loneliness he had never felt before. For the first time in his life, Luke felt completely helpless. His wealth, his power, his fame, none of it could help him now. In that moment, all the things he had built his life around seemed meaningless. He would have given it all up, every last penny, just for someone to be there with him, to hold his hand and give him hope. He would have traded it all for the love of a family, for a child's voice calling him dad. But here he was, trapped and alone, with no one to come to his rescue. As minutes ticked by, he began to lose hope. The road was so quiet, and he could barely see any lights in the distance. He thought about calling for help, but his phone was just out of reach, lying on the floor of the car where it had fallen during the crash. He strained, reaching for it, but the pain was too much. His strength was fading, and he knew he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Luke closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his life, and regrets pressing down on him. He thought about the empty mansion waiting for him, the silent halls, the empty rooms. He thought about the life he had led, one of power and riches, but also of loneliness, and he thought about the family he had always wanted, a dream that seemed so close yet was forever out of his reach. In that dark moment, Luke found himself whispering a quiet prayer, something he hadn't done in years. He didn't know if anyone was listening, but he felt desperate. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "If there's anyone out there, please help me." As he lay there, feeling weaker with every second, he thought he saw a faint light in the distance. He blinked, thinking it might be a trick of his tired eyes, but the light was real. It was moving closer, coming down the road toward him. His heart leaped with a spark of hope, a hope he hadn't felt in a long time. Sarah Jameson was making her way home. It had been a long, tiring day for her. Sarah worked 2 jobs, struggling to make ends meet, but despite her hardships, she was kind-hearted and always willing to help others. Though she didn't have much, she believed in being a good person, no matter the circumstances. Just as she turned onto the empty road, her eyes caught a strange flickering light in the distance. As she got closer, she realized it was a car, badly damaged, partly in the ditch. Smoke was rising from the hood, and a chill ran down her spine. Her heart started to beat faster as she saw the mangled metal and cracked glass. Without a second thought, Sarah pulled over to the side of the road and hurried out. She didn't know who was in the car or what condition they were in, but she knew she had to help. Her hands trembled as she approached, the smell of smoke and gasoline growing stronger. The sight of the crushed car made her stomach twist, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Hello? Can you hear me?" she called out, peering into the car. Inside, she saw a man slumped over the steering wheel. Blood trickled down his face, and his eyes were barely open. He looked weak, trapped, and helpless. "Please, don't worry. I'm here to help you," Sarah said, her voice trembling but filled with determination. She didn't know how she was going to get him out, but she was determined to try. The car was starting to smoke more heavily, and Sarah knew she didn't have much time. Her mind raced, thinking of what to do. She grabbed the door handle and pulled with all her might, but it wouldn't budge. She glanced around, spotting a large rock nearby. Without hesitating, she picked it up, using it to smash the window and clear a path to him. "Stay with me. I'm going to get you out," she called, hoping her voice would keep him awake. She reached inside, careful not to cut herself on the shattered glass, and unbuckled his seatbelt. The man moaned softly, barely able to lift his head. She noticed the pain in his eyes, a deep sadness that somehow made her want to save him even more. Just then, the smoke thickened, and she could see faint sparks starting to appear under the hood. Fear surged through her. The car could catch fire any moment. She knew she didn't have time to be scared. She had to get him out right away. "Come on," she urged, grabbing him by his shoulders. He was heavy, and every pull felt like a struggle, but she didn't stop. Bit by bit, she inched him out of the car, his body limp and unresponsive. Finally, with one last pull, she managed to drag him out of the wreckage and onto the ground a safe distance away. Just as she did, there was a sudden flash, and the car burst into flames. The heat washed over her, and she shielded him with her body, trembling from the adrenaline coursing through her. For a moment, Sarah just sat there, catching her breath and looking at the man she had just rescued. His breathing was shallow, and he seemed barely conscious, but he was alive, and she had saved him. As the sound of sirens grew closer, Sarah stayed by his side, holding his hand and whispering reassuring words. "You're safe now. Help is coming," she murmured, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. She didn't know his name or anything about him, but she felt a strange bond with this man she had saved. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics rushed to lift him onto a stretcher. They asked Sarah if she wanted to come along, and without hesitation, she climbed into the ambulance, determined to stay with him. She felt like she couldn't just leave him alone. not after what they'd been through together. At the hospital, Sarah waited in the cold, sterile hallway, her heart pounding with worry. She had saved him, but she didn't know if he would be okay. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to calm the nerves that were running wild inside her. Finally, after what felt like hours, a doctor came out and told her he was going to be all right. A wave of relief washed over her, and she let out a shaky breath. She didn't know why she cared so much about this stranger, but something in her heart told her that meeting him had happened for a reason. When Luke opened his eyes the next morning, he was met with a gentle, kind face. Sarah sat beside his bed, looking at him with a mix of relief and concern. He blinked, his memory of the accident hazy, but he recognized her. Somehow, he felt like he had seen her in his dreams while he was drifting in and out of consciousness. "Hi," Sarah said softly, giving him a small smile. "You had a rough night." Luke's throat was dry, but he managed a weak smile. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Sarah looked down, a little embarrassed. "I'm just glad you're okay. You're lucky, you know. That car almost didn't let you go." Luke's eyes softened as he looked at her. "I don't know how I'll ever thank you enough," he said, feeling a wave of gratitude that went deeper than words. This woman, a complete stranger, had risked her life to save him without asking for anything in return. They talked for a while, and Luke found himself captivated by her simplicity, her kindness, and her courage. She told him about her life, her struggles, and how she worked hard every day just to get by. He learned that she was barely making ends meet, yet she had still stopped to save him without a second thought. The more he listened, the more he admired her. She had a strength that came from her heart, not her wallet. And for the first time in a long time, Luke felt something warm stir inside him. He realized that in his wealth and luxury, he had lost touch with the simple beauty of kindness and bravery that Sarah seemed to carry so naturally. Before long, Luke felt a connection to her, one that was as surprising as it was strong. They were from two completely different worlds, yet she had risked everything to save him, and he couldn't help but feel that fate had somehow brought them together. This moment with her filled him with a sense of gratitude and hope, something he had been missing for so long. As they sat together, he couldn't help but think that meeting her had changed something deep inside him, and he wondered what this newfound bond might mean for his future. In the days following his recovery, Luke couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. Her bravery, kindness, and humility had left a lasting impression on him. He was alive because of her, and he felt a powerful urge to thank her in a way that went beyond words. So, one morning, he arranged a meeting and asked her to come by his mansion. When Sarah arrived, she looked around at the grand surroundings with wide eyes. Luke greeted her with a warm smile, offering her a seat across from him. For a moment, he was lost for words, overwhelmed by gratitude and unsure how to express it. Finally, he took a deep breath and handed her a small envelope. "Sarah," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "you saved my life. I don't know how to thank you properly, but please, I'd like to give you this as a small gesture." Sarah hesitated, looking down at the envelope, then back at him. She gently opened it and saw a check for a large sum of money. Her eyes widened, and she looked at Luke, stunned. "I can't accept this, Mr. Royce," she said softly, closing the envelope and placing it on the table. "I didn't save you for money. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Luke was taken aback. He had met people from all walks of life, but rarely had he encountered someone so selfless. He tried to convince her, but Sarah was firm. She refused the money, and her kindness touched Luke even deeper. Feeling inspired by her integrity, Luke came up with another idea. "Then let me help you in a different way," he offered. "I own a company, and we could use someone as hardworking and honest as you. Would you consider working for me?" Sarah's eyes brightened, and after thinking it over, she accepted his offer. Luke was overjoyed, not only because he could finally repay her kindness, but also because he realized he genuinely enjoyed her company. In the weeks that followed, Sarah started working at his company, and they slowly became friends. Their friendship grew naturally, each moment adding to their bond. Sarah often joined him for lunch, and Luke found himself opening up to her about his life, sharing stories he had never shared with anyone. She listened with compassion, her presence bringing him a sense of peace and warmth that he hadn't felt in years. Sarah, too, felt a sense of comfort around him, grateful for his kindness and surprised by his genuine interest in her well-being. Months passed, and Luke felt a new light in his life. Sarah's laughter filled the quiet rooms of his mansion, and her humble spirit brought a warmth to his world that no riches or luxuries could ever provide. Their lives, once so different, were now connected by a deep and unspoken understanding. Then one day, something strange happened. Sarah started feeling a mix of exhaustion and queasiness that she couldn't explain. At first, she thought it was just the stress of her busy schedule, but as days went by, the feeling grew stronger. Worried, she decided to visit the doctor, hoping it was nothing serious. When she sat in the doctor's office, her mind raced with all the possible explanations, none of them good. But when the doctor finally returned with the results, Sarah's world turned upside down. "Congratulations, Sarah," the doctor said with a smile. "You're pregnant, with twins." Sarah's jaw dropped. Twins? The news left her in complete shock. She hadn't been in a relationship, and she had no idea how this was even possible. Yet, as the doctor showed her the ultrasound, there it was, a small, undeniable image of two little lives growing inside her. She left the clinic, still in disbelief, her mind racing with questions. How could this have happened? It felt impossible, yet it was real. She was carrying twins, two precious lives that seemed to have come out of nowhere, as if by some miracle. Days later, when she finally gathered the courage to tell Luke, his reaction was even more surprising. She expected him to be shocked, or even concerned. Instead, his face softened and his eyes filled with a warmth she hadn't seen before. "Sarah, I know this sounds strange," he said quietly, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I feel connected to these babies, like somehow they were meant to be a part of my life too." Sarah looked at him, surprised by his words. Luke had confided in her about his inability to have children, the deep heartache he had carried for so long. Yet here he was, looking at her with hope and wonder, as if these twins were the answer to a prayer he thought would never be answered. Luke's unexpected attachment to the twins only deepened the mystery for Sarah. She didn't know how to feel. The pregnancy had come as a shock, and now Luke's words left her feeling both comforted and confused. Somehow, it felt like fate had brought them together, not just through the accident, but now through these two little lives growing inside her. Over the next few weeks, Luke became more involved in Sarah's life, offering to help her in any way he could. He insisted on accompanying her to her doctor's appointments, and even began preparing a nursery in his mansion. Sarah was grateful, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this whole situation was wrapped in a mystery she didn't understand. Luke's joy was evident, but in quiet moments, Sarah could see the depth of his emotions. She often caught him gazing at the sonogram photos with a look of awe and disbelief. For a man who had accepted that he would never be a father, this felt like a miracle beyond words. As the weeks passed, Luke's bond with the unborn twins grew stronger, and he began to believe that perhaps fate had granted him the family he had always yearned for. Yet, lingering questions filled both of their minds. Sarah still didn't know how this miracle had happened, and Luke couldn't explain the powerful connection he felt. As the months passed, Sarah's belly grew, and so did the questions swirling in her mind. She lay awake many nights, gently resting her hand on her growing stomach, feeling the soft kicks of the twins within. The idea of becoming a mother was both beautiful and overwhelming, yet one question haunted her. How had she become pregnant, especially with twins? She had never been in a serious relationship, and there was no clear explanation for these two lives growing inside her. The mystery left her feeling anxious and confused. She wondered if she should tell anyone about her worries, but she didn't want to sound strange. Whenever she looked at Luke, she saw the joy and excitement in his eyes, and a part of her didn't want to disturb that. He seemed so happy, so filled with hope, and his protectiveness made her feel safer than she'd ever felt before. Meanwhile, Luke's attachment to Sarah and the unborn twins grew stronger each day. He had always dreamed of having a family, and now it felt as though fate had answered his deepest wish. Every time he saw Sarah, he couldn't help but imagine the life he could share with her and the twins. He began treating her as part of his family, insisting on paying for her medical bills and making sure she had everything she needed. One evening, Luke surprised her with a visit to his mansion. He led her through the long, grand hallways until they reached a quiet, cozy room he'd had specially prepared. The walls were painted a soft shade of blue, decorated with clouds and stars. Tiny cribs stood side by side, each draped with a soft, warm blanket. Toys were scattered neatly around the room, and the sight of it all brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "This is for them?" she asked, her voice catching as she took in the thoughtful details. "Yes," Luke replied, his own eyes glistening. "I wanted them to feel at home here. I wanted you to feel at home here." He looked at her with a gentle smile. "You're not alone, Sarah. Whatever happens, I'm here for you and for these babies." His words brought a comfort Sarah couldn't put into words, yet the questions in her heart only grew. Despite Luke's kindness and the safety she felt around him, she was still plagued by the uncertainty of her situation. How could she be pregnant with twins, and why did Luke feel so deeply connected to them? At her next doctor's appointment, Sarah finally voiced her concerns. She explained her doubts, her confusion, and the mystery that had left her feeling both blessed and bewildered. The doctor listened thoughtfully, understanding her worries, and offered a possible solution. "There is a way to check for any unusual circumstances," the doctor said. "We could run a DNA test to determine any genetic connections. It's rare, but in some cases, medical phenomena occur that we can't fully explain. This test might give us some answers." Although Sarah was nervous, she agreed to the test, and the doctor assured her that they would have the results soon. Days passed, each one filled with suspense and anticipation. Luke stayed by her side, holding her hand and telling her that no matter what, they were in this together. Finally, the day of the results arrived. The doctor invited them both into his office, his expression calm yet serious. Sarah could feel her heart pounding as she looked between the doctor and Luke, who squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We've received the results of the DNA test," the doctor began. He paused, as if gathering his words, before continuing. "Sarah, this may be hard to believe, but the results show a connection between your twins and Mr. Royce's DNA." Sarah gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. Luke's hand tightened around hers, his expression a mix of shock and wonder. I don't understand," Sarah stammered. "How is that possible?" The doctor explained carefully. "Although it's very rare, there have been cases where certain genetic conditions or extreme emotional bonds can create unusual biological connections. In this instance, Mr. Royce's DNA has somehow influenced the pregnancy. The tests indicate that he shares a biological connection to the twins, even though traditional methods of conception weren't involved." The room fell silent as the weight of the revelation sank in. Luke's heart pounded, his mind reeling. For years, he had accepted that he would never be a father, that his dream of having children was lost forever. Yet here he was, facing a miracle he could hardly comprehend. Unable to hold back his emotions, Luke's eyes filled with tears. He pressed his hand to his mouth, overcome by a joy so powerful it almost frightened him. For so long, he had dreamed of this, of having a family, of being a father. And now, against all odds, it seemed that dream had come true in a way he could have never imagined. "It's a miracle," he whispered, his voice trembling as he looked at Sarah. "Sarah, these babies, they're ours." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Luke, seeing the raw emotion on his face. She couldn't fully understand how this had happened, but seeing his joy, she knew it was real. Luke had longed for children, for a family, and fate had somehow brought them together to give him what he had thought he could never have. But alongside the joy was a feeling of confusion and disbelief. Sarah couldn't shake the mystery of it all. How had this connection formed? Why did it feel like something beyond their understanding had brought them together? And what did it mean for their future? Luke's tears turned to a smile, one that radiated warmth and gratitude. He gently touched Sarah's face, his voice soft yet filled with conviction. "I don't know how this happened, but I don't care. All I know is that I feel like the luckiest man in the world. Sarah, these babies are my miracle, our miracle." With that, they embraced, each holding onto the other tightly, feeling the bond that had grown between them grow even stronger. The mystery might never be fully explained, but at that moment, they didn't need answers. They only needed each other. As they left the doctor's office, Luke couldn't stop smiling, his mind already racing with thoughts of the future, of family outings, and memories they would make together. Sarah, still awestruck, placed her hand on her belly, feeling a connection that went beyond words. In their hearts, they knew they had been brought together for a reason they might never fully understand, but one that filled them with hope and happiness. They had found family in the most unlikely way, and whatever mysteries lay ahead, they would face them together as a family bound by love and fate. Luke and Sarah sat quietly in the doctor's office, trying to absorb the incredible news they had just received. The twins were not only biologically linked to Sarah, but also shared a connection with Luke, something that defied logic and all scientific explanation. Both were stunned, overwhelmed by the mystery that had brought these babies into their lives. The doctor, sensing their bewilderment, cleared his throat and offered a gentle explanation. "Mr. Royce, Sarah," he began, "I understand how shocking this must be. But let me explain. In extremely rare cases, a person with sterility issues can experience what we call a genetic miracle. It's not something we fully understand, but occasionally, emotional factors and unique conditions can bring about biological connections in ways we don't typically see." The doctor paused, looking at Luke with a soft, understanding gaze. "Luke, you've carried a strong, unfulfilled desire to have a family, haven't you?" Luke nodded, his throat tight with emotion. The doctor continued, turning to Sarah. "And Sarah, your selflessness in risking your life for a stranger, your kindness and willingness to help without expecting anything in return. That kind of generosity is rare. It seems that these powerful emotions, the depth of Luke's wish for a family and your kindness, created an environment where a miracle could happen. It's a 1 in a billion occurrence, but these twins are the result of that bond." Luke sat in stunned silence, absorbing the doctor's words. Tears filled his eyes as he looked at Sarah, his heart overflowing with emotions he couldn't express. For years, he had longed for children, for the love and joy of a family, and he had come to believe it was something he would never experience. But now, here it was. His dream had come true in the most miraculous, unimaginable way. He reached for Sarah's hand, his voice choked with emotion. "Sarah, I can't believe this. I can't believe that these babies are ours. I never thought I'd get to be a father." His voice broke as he continued. "You don't know what this means to me. I feel like I've been given a second chance, like life finally gave me the family I always wanted." Sarah's heart softened as she saw the joy in Luke's eyes. She squeezed his hand gently. "Luke, I'm so grateful to have you by my side through this. These twins, they're our miracle. I promise you'll always be a part of their lives, and we'll raise them together. You won't be alone, Luke. You're family to us now." Hearing her words, Luke felt a peace he had never known before. He had spent so many years building wealth, creating success, but he now realized that all of it paled in comparison to the love and connection he had found with Sarah and the twins. He pulled her into a tight embrace, his tears flowing freely, overwhelmed with gratitude and happiness. He felt as though he had finally come home. Over the next few months, Luke and Sarah worked together to prepare for the arrival of the twins. Their friendship blossomed into a deep, loving bond. They shared dreams of what life would look like with the twins, from their first steps to their first words. They filled the nursery with soft toys, colorful blankets, and books. Sarah would often catch Luke standing in the nursery, a quiet smile on his face as he looked around, clearly already imagining the laughter and joy the twins would bring. When the day finally arrived, and the twins were born, Luke and Sarah welcomed them with tears of joy and hearts brimming with love. Holding the tiny babies in their arms, they marveled at the miracle of it all. Each little face, each tiny hand and foot, felt like proof that miracles could truly happen, that life could surprise them in the most incredible ways. Luke's life changed forever as he stepped into his role as a father figure. Every morning, he would wake up early to spend time with the twins, feeding them, cradling them, and gently whispering to them as they looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes. He felt his heart expand with every smile, every coo, every small milestone. Sarah watched as Luke blossomed in his new role, his joy apparent in every gesture, every moment he shared with the twins. Her heart swelled with gratitude for this man who had started as a stranger but had become her closest friend and now her family. They were raising the twins together, pouring their love and hope into every day, creating a home filled with warmth and laughter. Years passed, and the twins grew up surrounded by the love of a brave mother and a devoted father figure. They knew the story of how their family had come to be, how a moment of bravery and kindness had changed everything. They listened with wide eyes as Sarah told them of the night she had rescued Luke, and how, in return, Luke had given her and the twins a beautiful life, filled with love and care. For Luke, the emptiness he had once felt was gone, replaced by a life brimming with meaning. Every birthday, every holiday, every quiet evening spent reading bedtime stories with Sarah, and the twins brought him a joy that went beyond anything his wealth or power had ever provided. He felt like he had finally found his purpose, his heart finally whole. One evening, as they sat together, watching the twins play, Luke turned to Sarah, a soft smile on his face. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered. "Thank you for saving me that night, for giving me this life, for letting me be a part of their world. I can't imagine my life without you or them." Sarah took his hand, smiling back at him with warmth and affection. "Luke, we were meant to be here together, all of us. I can't imagine life any other way either." And so, they continued to build their lives together, each day deepening the love and bond that had brought them from strangers to family. Their story became a living testament to the power of kindness, hope, and the miraculous ways that love can bring people together. As the twins grew, they were surrounded by the unwavering love of a brave mother and a grateful father figure who had found family in the most unexpected way. Luke no longer felt lonely, his heart forever touched by the kindness that had brought him to this beautiful life. And Sarah, too, felt a profound gratitude for the unexpected family she had gained, a family bound together by the invisible threads of love and fate. The twins grew up knowing that their family story was a miracle, that love could be found in the most surprising places, and that sometimes all it took was one act of kindness to change a life forever. And as they grew, they carried that lesson with them, knowing that their family's love was a miracle that would last a lifetime. If you love this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring videos.